All right. So hello, everybody in the Facebook world. Welcome back yet again to another Facebook Live conversation. As always, I am Jessie Littlejohn. I'm the social media producer for Presbyterian Outlook, and I have with me Erin Rafferty and Ellen White, whose faithful conversation was just posted last week, and it was entitled Addressing the Hurt That Also Feels Holy, wherein they talk about how neurodivergent youth are reshaping ministry in faithful ways. So thank you both for coming and being willing to chat with us and to dive a little deeper into your faithful conversation. I want to give you a chance to introduce yourself. So Erin, if you want to go first, and then Ellen, you'll go next.
Great. Well, thank you for having us. My name is Erin Rafferty. I teach about disability at Princeton University. I'm also a practical theologian, and I do research with Christian congregations with Princeton Theological Seminary. I've written a couple books. One is about ministry with people with disabilities in churches. It's called From Inclusion to Justice. And one kind of fun fact is that I got to be Ellen's seminary professor when I was teaching at Princeton Seminary. But Ellen has since become, and actually kind of always was, such an amazing colleague. So I am thrilled to pass it to her to introduce herself.
Aw, thank you, Erin. I love you. My name is Ellen White. I work in youth ministry. I'm the director of Children, Youth, and Family Ministry at Pennington Presbyterian Church in New Jersey. It's one of the things that I do, and it's one of the things that I love doing. And yeah, for that, in the same vein as that fun fact, I'll say that in my 4 years of seminary, I took like 2 years of classes worth with Erin. So I used to joke that I minored in Erin Rafferty at Princeton Theological Seminary. So that's a little bit about me. I'm delighted to be here, Jessie. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. And before we jump officially into everything, I just want to say thank you to both of you for your ministry and for your vulnerability, for what you do in the church, for what you gave us in this article. As a neurodiverse person and as the parent of a neurodiverse 5-year-old, it was actually really emotional for me to read your conversation and to see both myself reflected in it and to see my son reflected in it, and to kind of recognize what we are doing right, and then also what are substantial needs that we still have within the universe, but also within the church. So I'm glad that we're talking about it, and we're doing it without any sense of stigma, and we're doing it without any sense of hesitancy, that this is something that is necessary to talk about. I recognize also that for those of you who are watching, and for those of you who may have read the article, that we may not all know what neurodiversity is or what that word means, or what it encompasses. So if one of you or both of you would be willing, can you give us sort of a 101 definition, course level kind of understanding of what neurodivergence is and neurodiversity is? Either one of you.
So maybe I can give kind of the textbook definition, and then maybe Ellen, if you're willing to share, some of your experience. So great. So, a lot of people think, oh, neurodiversity, that's such a long word. That must be an academic word. I think it's so important to point out that the neurodiversity movement is actually a grassroots movement that came out of the autistic self-advocacy movement. And it's pretty young. It's like 1990s. And so by neurodiversity, that neuro piece is like brains, right? Thinking about minds and brains. And then diversity is obviously for us as Christians, like the beauty of God's good creation. So you put those two things together, and what you see is people in the neurodiversity movement moving away from definitions of disability. And so including ADHD, when we think neurodiversity, we think brain. So we're thinking ADHD, autism, other emotional behavioral conditions, moving away from kind of pathologizing or assuming that those are deficiencies or negative in some way, and moving more toward an idea of, hey, these are just differences that are naturally occurring in the population. And so therefore, the way that folks think and move, right, and inhabit spaces are going to be different. So a couple of things that come to mind or might be helpful for folks to think about is sometimes people with autism don't want to make eye contact, and that doesn't mean they're not listening. It actually means they might be trying to listen better to you, but the stigma is, oh, they're not listening to me, they're not paying attention, because our culture, right, demands that people make eye contact. So we sometimes talk about neurodiversity versus neuronormativity, the idea that folks who are, we would call them neurotypical, who are not neurodivergent, so don't have ADHD, autism, and other conditions, those folks, like how they behave is sort of considered the norm. So another example might be some people with ADHD, it might really help them to fidget or move, to pay attention. But if you think about what you were taught in school, people were like, oh, sit still, right? Don't move around. And so you can just kind of already see how we have some biases about how people should behave. But when we kind of get down to these differences, like, they're not bad, they're just different. And so how can we move away from a culture that stigmatizes more towards a culture that celebrates, especially given that we're Christians and we can see the beauty and the dignity in God's creation. So why shouldn't it be the same, right, for all human beings? So Ellen, I don't know what you can share from your own experience.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful primer. And I think one of my first forays into understanding neurodiversity, or starting to understand, is that it involves everybody, right? It's not like a certain group of people are neurodiverse, is that neurodiversity encapsulates all neurotypes. So that's just like part of any human diversity, that we're all involved in that. And then some folks may be drawn to the label neurodivergent. And I know I relate to that term. I'm an adult with ADHD. And I think, like with any labeling system, it's folks choose what's meaningful to them. And so I know people with various realities and conditions who may not feel any sort of attachment to neurodivergent, and others who do. So I think, like with anything, it's always good to talk person to person and understand what's meaningful to someone.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that kind of tags into what I wanted to kind of touch on next, that you all hit on in various points in your conversation, which is the idea of, and we can talk about the curriculum, how we use the curriculum that you all reference, the Cultivating God's Brain Force, and this idea of adaptation versus accommodation. And I found that so meaningful, that we don't need to accommodate everybody, I guess, on some level, or that we can't accommodate everybody, but when we adapt how we do things, that everybody on some level will be accommodated. And I think Ellen, it was you who had said that, the kingdom of God is coming, and it's not what we're expecting it to look like. And so I appreciated that so much. And so I guess my question for you all, and how is it that we should be using the curriculum that you all created and worked on together? And if you want to talk a little bit more about the curriculum, that would be great. But just sort of how can we embody it as a church?
I have a thought that comes to mind, and then it might segue into some thoughts that you have, Erin. And I know you can speak very well to adaptation and kind of the impact that this work has had on your classroom culture. But something that comes to mind right away is just kind of in general in disability studies and design thinking and things like that. You kind of learn really quickly that often when things are made to be, or like designed to be more accessible off the bat, it's more accessible and it's better for everybody at different stages of life. So that's just, I think, an approach to design thinking and ministry in the church, both physically and emotionally. I think things are better. So that's, you could spend a semester talking about that, as we've done, Erin. So I'll try to put a pin in that there and say that I think the lessons that come through in this curriculum, Cultivating God's Brain Forest, are specifically designed for like congregational church settings, but I think have learnings that can be applied in a lot of different settings, including classroom spaces, whether or not if you're an instructor in a setting like that, or just understanding each other in the world and having more grace for one another. So, Erin, I don't know if you want to share some about your classroom experience or how you see the curriculum helping church spaces.
Yeah, well, Jesse, I just wanted to go back and say, I'm just glad that this really did like touch and minister to you personally, because I think we have so many people in mind, right? Like I had the reason Ellen contributed so much is because I had Ellen in mind. I was like, oh my gosh, Ellen is a neurodivergent youth pastor. Like, you know, representation matters. This is going to be, so we have so many amazing people that have contributed, you know, to the curriculum. And I don't think any of them like want to be accommodated in life. Like that does not sound like the kingdom of God. You know, we were just talking about, that sounds like so baseline, like not, you know, not even like really human. That's, you know, so I just think when we think about, you know, like my book is called From Inclusion to Justice. And I talk about how like accommodations don't do justice and like including people is not enough. We actually need to change. And Jesse, you mentioned some of the problems in the church. Like we need to change the way we do things so that people can feel like they can come in and feel welcome. I mean, we say this, all are welcome all the time, but like, what does that mean? Well, so I think I love that. I didn't even know that was in there. I love that you pulled that out, that it's about adaptation, not accommodation. And I will just say, you know, I heard a lecture by another pastor, and I think it's a neurodivergent pastor, Becca Marin Anderson. And she once talked about this whole approach to, and Ellen, you were talking about classrooms, and she was saying, you know, we should really be thinking about adapting the process, adapting the product, adapting the environment before we give people supports. And you think about like, gosh, so we tried to do this with our curriculum, you know, if you adapt the product, right? So we made it online, asynchronous, you know, and then like, we obviously have all these neurodivergent contributors, right? So it's like a cacophony, it's beautiful, a bunch of different voices. If you adapt the, you know, I can't remember if I started with the product or the process, but the process and the environment, right? All of these things. Well, who else do you need to like give supports or accommodate? And I think it points out like we're not thinking about humanity in a diverse enough way because we're not going through those motions. And then you realize like, oh, I don't need to do anything like special for anybody because I've kind of gone by best practices. So it's so helpful to me to think through those best practices in education. But like, I think we don't really have maybe best practices. I don't know when it comes to the church, when we're thinking about, you know, supporting, you know, neurodivergent folks, right? Sometimes we're often thinking about in terms of like racial ethnic diversity or gender diversity, but we haven't yet kind of gotten there that disability is an aspect of diversity. So I feel like our course really makes that apparent and then kind of works through these basic things that we do, like worship and loving each other, you know, and attention and prayer, and then kind of tries to like, you know, break the mold, right? We say that like, it's not about fitting neurodiversity into the youth ministry box, right? It's about like what neurodiversity can give to youth ministry.
Yeah. And maybe breaking the box a little. That doesn't seem like such a bad thing.
No. Yeah. Like, why do we need the box?
And I think that was something that as soon as you were talking about that sort of why does youth ministry need to look like what the church wants it to look like versus why can't the church look like what our youth are bringing to it, sort of thing. I know the primary focus in your conversation was about youth, but I think something that isn't talked about enough is how many neurodiverse adults there are as well that are just now, with recent science, are finding out that they are neurodiverse. Ellen, you mentioned in the article that you were recently diagnosed. I've recently come to understand my own neurodiversity. So it's kind of one of those, you know, we're all kind of figuring this out together kind of situation. And so when we look at church culture, you know, there are still debates, and I know in your article you sort of talked about like older youth, but you know, there are still debates in our church and in the church about whether or not children are welcome and whether or not they should be seen and not heard. And you know, if you'll indulge me, I'm thinking about a specific incident that happened not long ago at my home church. A member of our congregation had passed away, and we were holding a celebration of life service for her on a weekend. The family had invited a former pastor to come and officiate, which is a separate situation. And when I got there, the woman who had passed away, who I had known for over a decade and who had come to know me and my family and love me and my family and my children very much, somebody, as soon as I got there, had said, I was by myself, said, "Well, I'm really glad that you didn't bring your kids with you." And I was like, why? And she said, because, you know, so-and-so, the pastor, he just really doesn't like kids in worship, and he would not have been happy that they were here. And it was just so bizarre to me as somebody who has spent the last 11 years at this church. My children, you know, have grown up here. They've been baptized here. They've been nurtured and loved. To say like that they're not welcome there, even just because they're a little bit loud, or because my son, who has sensory issues and has a series of things that are going on in his little body, like he can't sit still during worship. He has to move around. He can't necessarily understand everything that's happening, and he is going to ask questions at the most inappropriate times. And you know, there's still this understanding of how do we do this well as a church, especially when all we hear, or not all we hear, but a lot of what we hear is we need more families, we need more young people, we need more, you know, kids in our church to continue the legacy of who we are as a ministry. And then at the same time that we are saying that, we're also expecting them, like kind of what you were saying, Erin, of all are welcome, but as long as you fit exactly what we want you to do. And so we have this very, still, as much as we have adapted, we still have this very rigid culture about what is expected of us. So how do we do better? Not that you have to solve all of those problems in the next 5 minutes, but like how do we do better?
I would first say, Jessie, thank you for sharing that. That sounds upsetting and painful, and I know it's kind of like just a one micro glimpse at the realities that you and your family and other families in our churches face. So thank you. And I think I don't know. It's hard. I'm trying to like track my brain a little bit and not go too far down these rabbit holes. Because I feel, but I'll start and maybe someone can rein me in later. But I feel very blessed by my church congregation. Pennington is where I grew up as well, and I work here now. And there are a lot of things that we're working on, and there are a lot of things that I think we really do well. Like it's kind of a natural part of our culture that disruptions or sounds or children or neurodivergent people in worship are welcome and encouraged to just like be themselves and function the way they're going to function in the worship space. And it's I think an ongoing evolution of like how can we adapt and evolve our worship and our church life to be better suited for children and families and neurodivergent people. So it's an ongoing thing. It's certainly not like a perfect textbook thing, but I am really grateful for some of the attitudes and cultures at Pennington. But yeah, I think it's certainly I don't even know if it's easier said than done, because it's not even really easy said to like to figure out.
You guys had to write a whole curriculum to show people how to do it. So
that's what part of it is, and that's the easier said part, I guess, is that I think this curriculum and hopefully other things, I mentioned this kind of like blooming, like I really hope it continues in the article. I really hope it continues to bloom and that more resources become more widespread like this. Because it's something that a head pastor can go through. It's something that a volunteer or just a lay person, like any level of person, can go through and get a lot out of it. So I think that that's definitely a starting place. That maybe the easier said part is getting people to do it who might not have the like inclination to do so themselves. So I think that encouragement and maybe sharing it with people and helping people be familiarized with neurodiversity and the topics in general. I think like you said, it's not a word that a lot of people know necessarily. It's getting a little more traction, I think more mainstream understanding. But yeah, that's a little bit of my babble. Erin, what would you add?
Well, I mean, I think hopefully the curriculum like expands people's imaginations. And as Ellen said, it's geared towards youth workers, but anybody can go through it. And absolutely, we've had groups of people in lots of different denominations. Like it was so amazing to get a friend from the Quakers, a friend emailing me and saying like, oh, we got so much out of this. And, but AME churches. And so I think it's great to work through as a group, and we'll talk about, we have discounts for that. But when you work through it as a group, like you can talk out, some of the things that you're learning. And we really did center the voices of neurodivergent youth, but then also youth leaders. I feel like you can use the curriculum in different ways. Like you could show the videos, right? And you could play the audio clips of the youth for your youth, right? And ask them, what they're learning. But every time we play, like one of the clips that we play, and it's in a lot of the promotional videos, where this young person who has Tourette's is talking about how it's hard for them to pray or worship while standing because they're so focusing on like standing and not ticking when they're doing that. And it's just easier if they could be seated. Like, honestly, so many adults are just like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Right. And it makes you more curious. It opens your imagination and hopefully makes you less judgmental. And one of the things that I think, one of the like gifts, because, COVID was awful, but there are gifts. And one of the gifts I felt was that we learned like, oh gosh, you really don't need to be like in the same place, right, to worship, or even at the same time. Well, you also don't need to all be doing the same thing. And I feel like this is just this weird, like, it's Presbyterian, but everybody, right, kind of has this thing. That's not, unison, that's uniformity, right? Like, so we have to let people, and I think there are actually other traditions that I would name that are maybe a little better at this. Like, we have to let people express themselves in worship in ways that make sense for them. And when I look around and I see that happening, when you're in a church that has like a cozy corner for kids, right, and they're playing, and then you've got like someone like me, right, I have a fainting disorder. So if I have to do this stand up, sit down, it's a disaster for me. And so I will stay seated. And then my daughter's in a wheelchair, and it's just, she is such a minister to me because she has to stay seated. So we stay seated together. We don't get up and necessarily sing, but that's faithful, right? That works for us, So it's just like you look around and all these people are expressing and connecting, but we're together. And I think that's almost more beautiful, right? Than like everyone was like, oh, I'll try to be in the box and like, don't get out of the box, right? So, I mean, I think that it's absolutely, and I talk about this a lot in my book, it's a mindset shift, right? It's really like that we need to really repent of our ableism because that's holding us back. And, we don't want to make people into problems, right? Jesus is so clear in that, like, no one's a problem. So then it really requires like to shift the status quo. And I get that that's not very Presbyterian, but I'm glad to hear, Ellen, that it's working better at Pennington and some other places. And I do see change. I do see change in the church.
Thank you both so much. I am just so thankful that you both are willing to have these conversations and to do such good work in your personal ministries together on a global level. And I think if anything has come from this conversation, I hope it's that more people do research. Erin, if you want to post your book in the chat, feel free to do that. I think, this is a topic that we need to learn more about, that we need to talk more about, that needs to sort of, I think at the beginning I said, destigmatize it. There is no taboo around, there shouldn't be a taboo around talking about our neurodiversities. And I think, Ellen, you said it in the article, there is beauty in the diversity of who we were created to be in the image of God. And that is exactly, our neurodiversities were created in the image of God. We all are reflected in that. And so thank you both. I want to give you an opportunity to talk about the curriculum and to share how we can access it. You talked about group discounts. So if you, I know you have the links ready to go. So if you want to just share.
I have the links ready to go. Of course, I'm having trouble posting them. So maybe Ellen.
I can do that for you. So if you guys want to talk, and I will post links. You guys can talk about the curriculum.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So the curriculum is available through online.ptsem.edu. It's called Cultivating God's Brain Forest. It has 5 lessons, as we talked about. It's all asynchronous, tons of resources in there, downloadable. Everything's downloadable, so you can use it on your own time. And then the email folks should reach out to if they want to get group discounts, because I believe it's $79, but there are group discounts if you're going to go through it together. So you just need to email iym@ptsem.edu. And then, once you get access to it, you can access it kind of anytime as you need to. So like your group can work through it at your own rate as well. And then, there's like coloring pages where a neurodivergent artist reinterpreted like biblical stories. There are these like congregational connection prompts where we try to make sure that these learnings don't stay in the youth ministry space, but really involve and invite, the larger church to have practices that are more accessible to everybody. So, and then there's sermonettes and testimonies, and the testimonies kind of do like a, it gets better type of thing for youth as well. So those can be really, really useful. And Ellen did both a sermonette and a testimony for us. And so like her fingerprints are all over this, and Lamar Hardwick, who's the autism pastor, is in there. So you'll just find like, you'll find people that look like you and your youth, because we know that there are a lot of neurodivergent leaders in the church, and we hope that this like affirms them too, so it's really for everybody. Ellen, I just like took off, but do you have anything else?
That's perfect. That's perfect. And I also couldn't figure out how to drop a comment in. So Jesse, thank you.
Between the three of us, we figured it out, I think.
We've dropped in a link to Erin's book, From Inclusion to Justice. So that's a great resource for congregational leadership. And yeah.
Awesome. All of these comments and links will be listed on our Facebook page. They're not going anywhere. And then if you are looking for the email address will be in the comments. It's also listed and referenced directly in the article. So don't feel like you can't reach out to us. If you need more information directly from the Presbyterian Outlook, feel free to email info@presoutlook.org and we will get back to you. Erin, Ellen, thank you so much for your time and for your faithful ministry. You all are good and faithful stewards and definitely needed in this world. So thank you for all you are doing and for this conversation. And I release you to go back to your day.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.